Hi there, I'm Ani Anderson from the Somatic Coaching Academy. And whether you're live or watching the recording, I'm super excited that you're here today to talk with me about negative emotions. How can we help clients and team members who have negative emotions? They can be so very challenging. So, before we talk about negative emotions, let's talk about another concept. This idea about how people can pay attention or not pay attention when they're experiencing negative emotions. So I like to think of it like the bars on your cell phone. You know how sometimes you're going through an area and there's like, it's dead, there's no cell service. Sometimes when we're talking to people who are having difficult emotions, it can feel like we're talking to people who have no cell bar service. And I like to think about this in terms of our conscious mind and our subconscious mind. So our conscious mind has about 5%, only 5% of our mind power at any given time. And the subconscious mind has about 95% of our mind power. So our conscious mind, when we're experiencing difficult emotions, can be trying so hard to keep us being socially acceptable so that the tribe doesn't leave us or whatever. So if you think about that 5% of the conscious mind, when we're upset, when we're dealing with something difficult, when there is potentially something threatening going on, and remember, this is perceived threat, those bars on our conscious cell phone can start to dwindle from 5 full bars and they can start to go down. And all of a sudden, it can seem like we're talking to somebody who just can't attend. They can't change how they're thinking. They're very, very stuck. And I call that person offline. When we're talking with clients and team members that are having challenging emotions, helping them to do anything other than feel what they're feeling in the moment when they're offline isn't going to work. So you've got to ride the wave while somebody's offline and get to a place where they've got a few of those bars up, maybe 3 bars or 3 bars or 4 bars up, so they can actually pay attention. So their conscious mind can actually pay attention to what you're talking about or what you're trying to help them with. So I wanted to talk about that first because sometimes we think that we can help people to modify how they're thinking and how they're feeling when they're offline, and we just can't. So what's best to do in those situations is to surf through, be present with those emotions, no matter how challenging they are, so the person can get on the other side. Now, what can happen when we try to challenge a person's negative emotion, we say things like, "Oh, you don't have to feel like that. Oh, it's not that bad," or whatever it is that we're saying. We could actually even be thinking that we're being supportive in those moments. When they're offline, it can be really risky for us to offer a counter idea to what they're feeling because their conscious mind is really offline. They're 100% subconscious at that time. We can become a part of whatever storyline is going on in a person's head and in a person's history at that moment if we try to say something other than what is going on for them. So, again, being with them in those emotions and riding through them is the best course of action. But even if we think we're being supportive sometime, we can become all of the sudden the villain or the person who they're trying to defend themselves against. And we didn't do that on purpose. Unknowingly, all of a sudden it's happening. So I wanted to have that conversation before we talk about cross mapping today and cross mapping for challenging emotions because there's a real value in being with somebody in whatever difficulty emotionally they're going through and not trying to manage, not trying to change, and just being with. And that cell phone bar strategy gives you an idea of when to just be with. So let's talk about now how we can help people through cross mapping who are dealing with difficult emotions. So first of all, let's talk about an emotion. An emotion is really two things. An emotion is a storyline or a thought pattern, and it's a sensory experience. So when I say storyline, I'm not saying that a person's making up what they're feeling emotionally. What I'm saying is that there are thoughts, there are ideas, there are belief systems that are all wrapped up in an emotional experience. There is also the sensory aspect of what a person is feeling in their body. So an emotion is really those two things, all wrapped up like a big ball of yarn that's all potentially a mess, intertwined. So we need to remember that when we're dealing with emotions because we can work with the thoughts and the storylines and or we can work with the sensory experience. Now, at the Somatic Coaching Academy, we love to work with the sensations. One of the reasons is because it's kind of the back door. We can get very consciously wrapped up in our storylines. And remember that conscious mind is only about 5% of our mind power. So when we're working with people who are having challenging emotions, difficult emotions, negativity, we have the capacity very easily to bump them into a place where they go offline. That 5% goes offline, and they're totally subconscious. We want to be able to maintain conscious awareness for a person as long as we possibly can while we're working with them. And one of the ways to do that is to help them work with their sensations rather than just going into the storyline. It's interesting to me specifically in the coaching field, but also in the therapeutic field, how the amount of results that coaches and therapists get with their clients isn't always stellar. It isn't always 80%, 90% of people get results in programmings. Very often, the results that coaches and therapists get aren't super high. And one of the reasons is because that people resist change. And one of the biggest ways that people resist change is with negative or challenging emotions. And not a lot of people know how to navigate that. And we can do that. We can navigate that by being with the sensory aspects and not getting wrapped up in somebody's storyline. So let's talk about cross mapping here for a second. Cross mapping is a proprietary tool that we use. So sometimes people say, I haven't heard of it before. That's why, because we created it. We've been using it for years. And more and more graduates get certified in cross mapping, you'll hear about it more and more. So, cross mapping can be used for both physical discomfort and for emotional discomfort. And it's an inquiry method. So, a lot of times with therapeutics, we put hands on when we're trying to help people to change. And in coaching, of course, we don't. There's inquiry methods that are used in coaching. So, this is an inquiry method, but it actually helps people to modify their sensory experience. So, we forget sometimes when we're having a challenging emotional experience, there is a sensory experience that's going on. I think right now it's really easy to see in the news. We hear these things about the mental health challenges that are going on out in the world. And we can forget sometimes that mental health actually is about the feelings that we're experiencing. Stress isn't just a mental construct that we don't feel. We feel stress in our bodies. Anxiety is such a problem because of what it feels like. Depression is a problem because of what it feels like. Fear is a problem because of what it feels like. All of these things are difficult because of what they feel like. Of course, because of the thought patterns that are associated with them, but the things that really stop us are our senses. So, cross mapping offers us an opportunity to offer the brain and the nervous system and our physiology an alternate experience. So, very often, when we're experiencing a negative or a challenging emotion, it's all we can focus on. That stress or that anxiety, it's so consuming that it's all we can focus on. But in any moment, there are unlimited amounts of possibilities for what we could experience, right? So we get very locked into this one way of experiencing a problem. And then we forget that we have other options. So cross mapping offers our physiology, our body mind, another option. And then what we start to do is we start to go back and forth and experience what we don't want to feel and what we might want to feel differently and back and forth. And by doing that, one of the things that it helps us to do is it helps to tell our physiology that, hey, what I'm experiencing right now isn't necessarily a threat. So remember, when we think that whatever we're experiencing in our physiology is a threat, we start to work very hard to potentially defend ourselves, to get ourselves safe. And that 5% of the conscious mind is paying a lot of attention to those things. So when we start to go back and forth and we say to our physiology, I'm experiencing this thing, but here I am and I have choice. And I mean, a lot of times we also make that experience even bigger in the physiology. It's like all of a sudden we're saying, it's not a threat. I'm okay right now. And we're creating some internal safety. So that's super cool. And then we're also introducing, and I could feel like this over here. So do I want to feel like this Or do I want to feel like this over here? And then we start to experience that we have choice. Now, I can't help but get on a soapbox about this for just a second, because in the world, there are so many problems right now, politically, religiously, healthcare, educational system, you name it. We're having problems with it. And so I think very oftentimes we forget that we have choice. And of course, when we want to create change in the world, the best way to do that is to start with ourselves, and reminding ourselves that we have choice in any moment is not only incredibly empowering, I really believe for the collective right now, it's incredibly important. So when we cross map, we remind ourselves, I have choice. And sometimes I choose when I'm cross mapping personally that I want to feel the crummy feelings that I feel. Sometimes I choose that I want to feel a different sensory experience. It actually doesn't matter quite as much what I choose to feel or modify my sensations around. What matters is that I remind myself that I have choice. All of us have choice. I think it's one of the most powerful things that we can do as practitioners, as therapists, as coaches, and as leaders is to remember that we have choice, empower the people who are helping to remember that they have choice. And we can do that through somatic practices and embodiment tools. So, whether you're here live or you're watching the recording, I'm so glad that you did today. Cross mapping is a super powerful tool. I'm interested to hear your insights, your wisdom, and I'm sure that there are some people watching who also practice cross mapping. So, in the comments below, please make sure to share your experience about cross mapping. And of course, if this was helpful, please share it. The more people who understand how to be the change, to elicit change in our world right now, the better. So, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.